Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Rotary today. Cindy is gone, so Eric Ellefson is my name, and I have the honor of leading today's meeting. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, in keeping with tradition, let's go ahead and would you join me in repeating the four-way test, please? First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And now I'd like to welcome up Matt Paulson to share with us an invocation, please.
Would you all please join me in a word of prayer? Heavenly Father, you've called each of us in this room to roles of leadership in our community, in our businesses and nonprofits, in our churches and our homes. We pray that you would grant us the strength, wisdom, vision, and courage we need to effectively carry out the leadership roles that you have called us to. We pray that we would not be afraid, and we pray that we would not hide during critical moments, as King Saul did when he was first appointed to be king of Israel. Instead, we pray that we would follow the examples of great biblical leaders like David, Deborah, Nehemiah, Peter, and Paul, who accepted your call to lead, even when it came at great personal expense. Help us lead with integrity, truth, fairness, and love for our sisters and brothers in our community. Help us lead for the goodwill and benefit of others, and help us lead to further your kingdom here on earth. Amen.
We do have some guests today, and in light of time, I'd just like to, if you do have a guest, could you please stand and stand with your guest, please, and just be recognized. Perfect. My guest, Rachel. Thank you. And Rotary business. We have a little bit of Rotary business today, so I'd like you to just kind of mark your calendars. And a little bit of a reminder for the Sanford Invitational, which is coming up here, and we're going to have lunch there. And we've got a great list so far. Bill Gasson, Andy North, and then I think we have one other PGA champion that's going to be, or PGA competitor is going to be joining us as well. So make sure that you mark that down on your calendars and join us that day if you're able. And then we also have a new introduction for a new member. And so if Steve Sikorsky could please come up. And Denny, could you join in, please?
Hello, Rotarians. It's my pleasure to introduce today one of our new members, Dr. Denny Graber. Denny was born and raised in Sioux Falls. He's a graduate of Lowell Elementary, Edison Junior High, and Washington High School. He then went to Augustana College and graduated, and then he entered the South Dakota Air National Guard. In 1969, he entered pilot training, and then he returned to Sioux Falls to fly the F-100 fighter with the South Dakota Air National Guard, and he was a management trainee at John Morrill. In 1974, he sought a new career, and he went to dental school to the University of Nebraska. 1978, he graduated from dental school and returned to Sioux Falls and started a practice there on 26th and Cliff called the Dental Comfort Center. And then he continued flying, and then he retired from flying the Air National Guard as a lieutenant colonel. And then in 2013, Denny retired from dentistry and sold his practice. Since 2013, Denny has become a world traveler. If you want to go somewhere in the world, anytime, anywhere, just ask Denny and he will go with you. So Let's give a warm welcome to our newest member, Dr. Denny Graber.
Thanks, Steve. This is going to be short. It's a privilege for me to be here, to be a new member of the downtown Rotary team. And I'm 79 years old, so I feel like I'm probably one of the oldest rookies you've gotten in here on the team. But I'm really looking forward to it. And hopefully, over the years, I've had some experiences that we can share and gain from. The first time I came to a meeting with Steve, I didn't know what to expect about Rotary. And after I've been at a few meetings now, the thing that comes to mind most is the palpable desire and enthusiasm to serve and do good for mankind and certainly for the community, and of course have some fun and learn along the way. So I'm excited about being here. And getting back to being a new member at my age, I want to paraphrase the great American philosopher Andy Rooney. I say that with a smile, but Andy had a way of taking common knowledge and putting it in a good way. And he said, I think it's interesting how people want to live a long life, but nobody wants to get old. Now, isn't that the truth? And I'm thinking, being part of this group and the enthusiasm they have is going to be part of the answer for me on how to live a long life without getting old. And as Steve said, I've born and raised here in Sioux Falls, so I've seen a lot of changes. When I went through Washington High, graduated in '60, there were probably about 66,000 people here in the city, so it's grown a bit. Seen a lot of changes. This room used to rotate. And I know there's other people out here I know that grew up with me, there's my age or older, and I think they probably feel the same way I do, that grateful to have grown up in Sioux Falls, and that Sioux Falls was good to me. And I hope being part of Rotary is going to let me pay back to the community a little bit of what I owe my good life here in Sioux Falls. And I know some of the people here, but most of you don't, so I look forward to meeting you, talking together, hearing your story, and hopefully together we can solve some problems. And as you can tell from the last 2 minutes, doing public speaking was not part of my 2 previous avocations, so thanks for listening.
Well, Denny, welcome to the club. Looking forward to meeting you, and as a former 114th member myself and pilot, we'll have something to talk about. So, with that, we also want to keep the tradition, or basically, along with the board's kind of decision to keep Rotary international and in the in-the-knows for what's happening on more of a national level. In front of the club, we also would like to bring up 2 members to tell us a little bit about the Rotary Exchange. So Dave Eastland and Tim Kreminga, please.
Well, we had a wonderful trip where on this friendship exchange with Sweden. There was 10 of us from South Dakota, or from the district, that went on this trip, and it was Ginger Thomas from Rotarian from Brookings and her husband, and myself and Jan and Tim and Corey from Sioux Falls, and from Mitchell there was 2, Dave Stevens and Gopal Vyas, and from Pierre, Kelly Gloat and his wife Sue. And anyway, we went on this exchange. It was supposed to be in 2020, but got kicked down the road because of COVID. So then it was 2021. No, that didn't work. So anyway, we made it this year and had just a wonderful trip. When we got, it was our responsibility to get there, stayed in a hotel for a couple nights, and then the Rotarians there, it was 10 I think there's about 6 Rotarians and their spouses. They picked us up, and from then they took care of us. They transported us around Sweden for 10 days. We stayed in their homes, and it was just a wonderful experience. There's a few lunches we bought and this and that, but otherwise they fed us, they entertained us, and showed us the countryside. It was just a wonderful experience. Jim?
So back in April, Tony asked, we've got 2 slots open for this Rotary exchange trip to Sweden. Anyone interested? Well, my wife and I had planned to go to Israel in March, and that got canceled because of COVID. So I took out my phone, sent her a text, do you want to go to Sweden? And I knew Dave was going, and of course she didn't respond to me, which didn't surprise me. She's not real fond of traveling. So Dave and I and Jan and Corey had lunch later that week, and discussed what the trip was about, what that meant, that type of thing. So anyway, we joined the Rotary team at the last minute, basically decided to go in April. We went the middle part of June. Basically, the last 2 weeks of June, we spent in Sweden. So how many Swedes do we have in the room? You know, they would tell you that there's more Swedish people in the United States than there is in Sweden. They have about 10.4 million people living in Sweden. Back in, I'm going to say, the late 1800s into the 1930s, about 1.5 million Swedish people immigrated to the United States. At that time, they only had about 4 or 5 million people in their country, so a significant percentage of people immigrated here. And as we went around the countryside, what did we see? We saw trees and lakes. No wonder they moved to Minnesota, because that looked just like the home country. And I don't know, you know, as you think about, okay, where are we at in Sweden? Those type of things. We went to Gothenburg. So Gothenburg is where we flew into. That's the 2nd largest city in Sweden. I don't know how familiar you are with the country. The country is slightly larger than California. They're 12th in terms of global income, you know, so they're a very wealthy country. But familiar companies, IKEA, Volvo, and AstraZeneca would be what we saw. I mean, that's where the headquarters were, actually in Gothenburg, and we saw those companies. One of the things that surprised me, though, is you learn more about their country. Sweden has been at peace for over 200 years. They actually have set the world record of not being in war. You know, you would think Switzerland, but it's actually Sweden. And while we were there, we got news that Turkey, you know, said, okay, we're not going to, you know, fight them joining NATO, but they're going to become NATO members. So I think one of the things that we learned, or at least I experienced, being able to spend this time, you know, that much time with individuals from that country. I have 10 new friends. They just happen to live in Sweden.
Yeah, Tim offered to stay there longer, and we brought him back. We'll run through a few quick slides. This is one of the fishing villages we went to. Took the ferry over there in this island, and it was interesting. On this island there was a church, and in the church they had up on the walls in there in 1790, and then there'd be about 13 names. It was people that had died out on sea in a boat, and they had various years, different times that had happened. But it was an old fishing village that now was a little bit more tourists and just people that had their own places there. But here's most of our group. I think there was 4 of them that aren't in here, but along with some of the folks that we stayed with. But you can see it was a wonderful time. The first house we stayed at was Torleif at his house. And you got to say the you got Torleif. It stayed at his house, but this is up on the 3rd floor, and you could look out there into the sea and the North Sea, and it was just a wonderful location. And the nice thing was all 20 of us traveled together, that they had it set up. So the 10 Swedes were with us. They housed us in 3 different houses. His sister had one, and his mother had a basement that somebody could sleep in, kind of right in there. So we had a wonderful time right there. And their little neighborhood had a sauna. And so we had to go to the sauna, of course, and had to get in there and get good and sweaty and jump into the sea. And then you had to get in the sauna and jump into the sea. You had to do it twice. You couldn't do it just once. And but it was just a great experience being there in that part.
We'll go through these pictures fairly quickly, but just try to share the experience with you. We had an opportunity to go fishing for mackerel out in the ocean with that boat. This is hieroglyphics from 1,500 years ago in terms of some painting that they take care of there. And we just happened to be there in their midsummer celebration. So as you can see, the northern part of Sweden is, it's on summer, first day of summer, 24-hour sunlight. In fact, they said you can actually see the sun circling the earth if you go up there then. This is our national holiday. So the Friday after, the first day of summer, the country shuts down, and they have this celebration, and it's very traditional in terms of what they do. So there's dancing and singing, they raise that pole, and so we got to participate in that. So this is what you do in the midday and get that over by 1 o'clock so everybody can run home, get with their families and friends, and start really celebrating with a lot of fun things. And this is some of the homes that we stayed in. You can see that they set them up very nicely. We had great meals the whole time that we were there. The one thing that I would like to mention too, that again, you learn that they're the most peaceful country ever. When we were on that island that Dave mentioned, we step off the boat and I hear a jet buzzes. And I look at our host and I said, well, just like here in Sioux Falls, what'd you do, buy F-16s from us? And he said, no, that's our jet. The next one that buzzed us, I caught the body of the jet, and sure enough, it was a different design. And I believe, and you guys in the Air Force would know, but I think it's a Saab fighter that they actually developed even over 200 years of peace, which amazed me in terms of how they approach things, especially as part of the background conversation is what's happening in Russia and what's happening with Putin.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time around a table, and as you can see here, when they sang songs, and we just had a great time sitting there. And of course, here we are having a toast, and they taught us appropriately how to go skål and toast everybody. There is a way, and in doing that, but the tablecloth in this home, it was the whole length of the table. It was 150 years old, but went the length of the table for all the people, and it was it had been passed down in one of the families for many years, and there's a little wine and beet juice that got spilled on it, but they got it cleaned up again too. So, but it was just a lot of fun with everybody there. Oops, I went by that one here. And this is the next home that we went to stay in. The third one, and this was a bed and breakfast, basically, that one of the Anna Marie had, and this was a wonderful spot. It was, anyway, this is where they had their festivities in the evening of the midsummer festivities. They shot off a cannon, and there were some games that we played, and it's amazing how a lot of us 70 years old and stuff, running around a tree and doing this and that, but it was just a lot of fun. Let's see here. Maybe go through these pretty.
One quick comment here And I know you can't read it, but in the first church we stepped in and toured, if you will, is that this is a list of pastors of that church. The first pastor is 1128 to 1135. 900 years ago, they had that church, and it was near this fortress that protected that community along the sea. I think as you saw, we saw a lot of pictures of the sea, and I might just flip through some of these just because this is really where we spent most of our time. I'm not going to let Dave make any comments about these three characters. But we had a great time to visit and learn about their culture and how, I would say how we're influenced by the ag community. They're influenced by that sea and everything around them in that community. This is a picture of some of the women that we went to a linen factory that, and then Jan and Dave at the castle that we were able to tour. This was downtown Gothenburg. As you can imagine, very old city, but very well taken care of. And it was just a great experience learning about what their lives were about, what their concerns were. And one last comment I'll make, and I'll let Dave wrap it up. They know our history better than we do. In fact, the couple that we stayed with, Jurgen is the picture here, they've actually studied Abraham Lincoln and spent a week in Springfield, Illinois, just to understand the dynamics of who he was. And that's how they seemed to approach everything. They knew, they knew our country better than we did, and it was a great experience. If you get an opportunity, if Tony or Cindy asks you to go on a Rotary Exchange because I got a couple open slots, if you're in a spot in life that you can do that, sign up because it's worth it.
The folks from Sweden are coming to South Dakota, and they will be here at our Rotary meeting the last Monday in September. And there's a brochure on most of the tables there, and it tells about the Rotarians that are coming to visit us. You get a chance, you have other questions, see Tim or I or others that have been on the exchanges. But thank you. Yep.
Dave, appreciate that. Just another fine example of opportunities to get to know Rotary International a little bit more. And I know Kayla Etrim and Dave are leading a committee for us to be able to share a few more of those experiences down the road. So if you're interested to learn more, make sure that you reach out to one of those, especially Dave, who's experienced it. So Josh, Joel, if you could join me up on stage. Very excited for today's program. If you're a sports fan, especially of local sports, we have the tip of the spear here today. So Josh Fenton is, I believe, 3 weeks into moving his family to the community or the local community in the local area. So he's been with the Summit League for now since January, I believe. Yes. Fair? Yeah. So we've got him brand new and excited to have Joel maybe visit a little bit and learn a little bit about Josh's vision for the Summit League. Thank you very much for joining us, Joel.
Thank you, Eric. I think maybe we would start off, Josh, by asking you to introduce yourself to the group and to tell us a little bit about your background, your family, and your career prior to this point in time.
Sure. Thanks, Joel. First off, I just want to say thanks for having me. It's been wonderful just being in this community over the past few weeks, and I'll get to my family here in a second. Sioux Falls, as you all know, very much more than I, is a special place, and we're finding that out quickly. And so we've enjoyed our short period of time here in Sioux Falls. Well, I'm originally from a good rural, small farming community in west central Minnesota called Litchfield, about 70 miles straight west of Minneapolis, St. Paul. My mother was an educator, a second grade teacher for over 30 years, and my dad was in the automobile industry. My grandfather, actually his father, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, and a few uncles in there owned a General Motors dealership. up until about 2009 when the American car industry went in a little bit of a different direction. So he's since sold it. So I grew up in Litchfield, graduated from Litchfield High School. Sports were a part of my life as I grew up. I played golf, I played hockey, I played football, played a little baseball, even a little bit of basketball in between all of those. And then once I graduated, life took me to Ames, Iowa. So I have an undergraduate degree from Iowa State, go Cyclones. And I was fortunate enough to have a short stint. I like to tell people that I had, I guess, a cup of coffee playing college golf over at Iowa State. I was a better high school and a junior golfer than I probably was a collegiate golfer, so that didn't last too long. But I have a finance undergrad degree from Iowa State. From there, I went back to Minneapolis, spent about 18 months in the private industry, worked for a worldwide management consulting firm called Accenture, and that just really wasn't for me. And so I had this thought that I wanted to actually work in college hockey, and I actually was going to be a college hockey coach. I wasn't good enough. I played high school hockey, as I said. I wasn't good enough to play college hockey. But I had this thought, and so I sent letters. This is, kind of pre-email, or when email was just getting going. Letters to about 3/4 of the Division I men's programs across the country. Most went completely unanswered. Some were answered politely, saying thanks but no thanks. One was positively answered, and that was helped by a mutual friend and a connection. And that was at a place called Miami University. So I was fortunate enough, Joel invited me 2 weeks ago, and we got to hear about real estate and the retail side of things here in Sioux Falls, and Raquel Blount was up here, and she's a Miami University graduate. And so I found myself in Oxford, Ohio, which is about an hour north of Cincinnati, good rural community itself, good college feel. And I worked for the Division I men's college hockey program there. I was a volunteer assistant coach. I have my graduate degree from Miami. And then from there, what came of my professional career and ultimately getting to, I suppose, where I am today is that coaching wasn't going to be where I was going to, I guess, make my living, and it was going to be more in administration. So I found my way into the athletic administration side of Miami, and I spent 11 years in Oxford working in various roles and capacities in the athletics department at Miami. And then from there, I had an opportunity in the summer of 2013. So the college hockey world was realigning a little bit from a conference standpoint, and a new conference was being formed. Miami was heavily involved in the formation of that conference, which is called the National Collegiate Hockey Conference. And so I was in kind of, I suppose, right place, right time, from one of the member schools. The NCHC, as we refer to it as, had a commissioner, the former CEO of the United States Olympic Committee, a gentleman by the name of Jim Scheer, a wrestler. For those that are wrestlers, may recognize that name. He didn't last too long at the NCHC, stepped back into the Olympic movement, and so the opportunity was there, and the membership came to me. And so we moved our family, and I'll come back to my family here in a second, from Oxford, Ohio, to the beautiful Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is where the NCHC offices are. And that's where I spent the past 9 years of my professional life until last fall. Tom Duple, our previous commissioner, announced his retirement, and the Summit League position came available, and they had hired a search firm, which is pretty regular, and the search firm reached out to me asking if I had interest, and my wife and I talked a lot about it, and I saw it as a great opportunity, a great new challenge in just working back in the multi-sport world of intercollegiate athletics. And so I got involved in the interview process, went through a couple rounds of interviews. The first one was over Zoom. The second one was here in Sioux Falls, up at the Holiday Inn Express on the north side of town. And the next thing you know, I left there on December 1st, I believe the interview was, and I got a call that evening that the Summit League Board of Directors, which are represented by our presidents, wanted me to become the next commissioner. And so, to be honest with you, it was an easy decision. I had a great job. The NCHC was wonderful. Hockey has been a part of my life since I was a small child, but this was a great opportunity, and I thought a lot of great things could come of it. And so we took the job, and I officially started. It was a unique transition. I started January 1, but I was a special consultant, not full-time yet because I was still working for the NCHC, and then I came on full-time really towards the end of April. And then, as was mentioned in kind of the introductory remarks, we've just recently transitioned to Sioux Falls, and so we moved in right at basically August 1st. My wife, Lindsay, I met her at Miami University. She's a native Michigander, just outside of Detroit. We have 3 small boys. I have a 13-year-old Ryan, I have a 10-year-old Luke, and I have a 7-year-old Drew, who gives us everything we can ask for and more.
And they're in the Brandon Valley School System?
Yeah, we live on the east side in kind of 6 Mile and 10th Street there, and so it's in the Brandon Valley School District. So I have we have a challenge in the morning. I have one at Fred Assam, I have one at the intermediate school, and I have one at the middle school. So
Good. Well, so coming from that background, what was attractive about the Summit League? I mean, what made you think that would be a profitable move for you?
yeah, so for those that maybe don't know the NCAA kind of Division I landscape, we have 32 Division I multi-sport conferences, and multi-sport conferences is just what it says, representative of multiple sports. When I worked in the hockey world, I worked as a single sport conference commissioner. So there's 32 of us across the country, anywhere from the SEC and the Big Ten, I suppose, all the way down to, I don't consider the Summit League to be at the bottom, but we would definitely be considered mid-major. And so the attractiveness, Joel, really to kind of an opportunity to work in a Division I conference environment, lead a Division I conference. Now, I will tell you this, and if she were here, I think she would agree with me, we weren't going to move anywhere. It had to be right opportunity, right kind of mix of ingredients, right location, I suppose, in the country. And we just saw the Summit League as just an incredible opportunity. I talked about really kind of 3 strengths that I believe the Summit League had and continues to have, and that's number 1, I think a strong foundational base in its membership. The conference has gone through a lot of iteration and changes over many years, many decades. But I believe that the conference has never been in a stronger spot today in the configuration of the member institutions that we have, the 10 member schools that we have. And that's a credit to Tom Duple and the member institutions to get the configuration to where it is. We have institutions that I believe are committed to what I think is the second strength, a high Division I experience. Now, we're not going to spend money like the Big Ten and the SEC are going to spend money. We may not spend money like some of those that are maybe in the middle, the Mountain West, the MAC, the American, those types of things. But I believe that our institutions are committed to a Division I experience that's at a higher level. And I don't know, as I think about my colleagues across other conferences, I don't know that my colleagues across some of our other conferences could say that. And so I saw that. And then the last thing was, and I think it's a lot of people in this room in particular, passionate and engaging fans. I came to the basketball tournament for the first time, so I had a chance to see that. That's a great reflection of passionate and engaging fans. You all are passionate and engaging for your favorite sport programs. What we need to do is we need to further engage you, develop more affinity to a conference brand. We want you to become members of the Summit League. We're not asking you to change affiliations in some manner, but we believe that there's more that the Summit League can do to engage fans. But I saw those 3 things, Joel, as really the main things.
And having now been on board in some capacity for 8 months or so, has anything about the Summit League surprised you in your introductory
Ooh, that's
months?
a good question. Well, I mentioned it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but when I came that first week of March for the basketball tournament, I've been around a lot of intercollegiate athletic events across the country. I've been around a lot of sporting events just in general, just given the nature of my role in different areas. There is not many better, there's bigger in terms of attendance size, capacity, that type of things, but there's not many better in terms of atmosphere and energy than what I witnessed at the Summit League Basketball Championships this past March. And I know it's grown over time, thankful to a lot of support from community organizations like the Sioux Falls Sports Authority, the city, and many others. But that surprised me. I knew it was a special event because I'd heard a lot from people, common members in the NCHC who are also members in the Summit League. They had told me about it, but when I first got here and had a chance to witness games and just the energy in the Premier Center, that was pretty special. So that surprised me.
Well, we'll come back and talk about that in a little bit. In fact, I really want to talk about basketball, but you did say it was a multi-sport league, so...
So we better talk about other sports,
yeah,
right?
let's talk about those other sports a minute. What are those? What are the strongest programs and the strongest other sports besides basketball?
Yeah, so we sponsor 19 sports on the men's and the women's side, and we've got a collection of sports in the fall, a collection in the winter, and certainly a collection in the spring. So what I would say to your question, Joel, in terms of strength, our volleyball programs have competed at a pretty high level. We've had 3 in particular kind of be towards the top of the conference, and these are the 3 that were picked towards the top of the conference for this current season. Denver, USD, and Omaha. We've been a multi-bid league in terms of teams advancing into the NCAA tournament for the volleyball championship. And so the volleyball success that we've had has been pretty good in terms of a mid-major, and that's something that we're going to continue to hopefully build upon. Our staying with the fall, frankly, our men's and our women's soccer programs, we've had some great men's programs. Denver's had some really good men's programs. They're off to a good start again this year in a very early season. Have beat some pretty good opponents over the past week. But our men's and our women's soccer programs are pretty good. And then, we've got some pockets of individual success. We've got some schools that have been good in track and field. USD's been very good in track and field. SDSU's been very good in softball. Your alma mater, Joel, Oral Roberts, has been very good in baseball. They had a really, really good team this past year. I thought they could make some noise in the regional. I think they got put into a tough regional. So, kind of some pockets of success here and there with individual schools in different sports. But, the first ones that I would mention, I think those are the ones that, in terms of broad-based support. The other thing I'll mention before you go to your next question is, so everybody sponsors men's and women's basketball. You have to sponsor men's and women's basketball to be a member of the Summit League. We actually used to have what are called core sport requirements, where you had to sponsor, everybody had to sponsor other sports. Some of those have gone away over time. It's something I'm going to talk to our membership about in the near future. But everybody has a volleyball program, and everybody has a women's soccer program. And so all 10 member institutions, including St. Thomas, which is our recent member, have those programs. Other than that, everybody kind of mixes and matches a little bit in terms of the 19 sports that we sponsor.
So are you anticipating any surprises in some of the other programs, some of the in this coming season, volleyball or soccer or?
I certainly hope so, because if there are surprises competitively, and I'm assuming that's where you were going with the question, it means that we're doing some good things on the playing surface, on the fields, on the courts, in the pools, that type of thing. And so I don't know that I would necessarily project anything great, but I always know that our student athletes surprise us each and every day in just what they're able to accomplish and what they're able to do. And so I do think we'll have some programs that will be kind of towards the top. The 3 that I mentioned in the fall, so we've cross country also goes in the fall. But Denver was picked number 1 in women's soccer and in men's soccer and in volleyball. They've had some high success in some of the sports that we sponsor, including some in the spring. They've historically won our golf championships, our tennis championships. Now they don't sponsor softball, baseball. Obviously, their basketball programs, I think if I had the athletic director here, they would say, we're going to get better. We need to get better. They probably fall a little short there, but in some of the other sports, they've been very successful.
So this, it's interesting timing for you to have taken this position at just the time that the NCAA is entering into some pretty uncharted territory. To say the least. This whole concept of name, image, and likeness has had a fairly substantial impact on our local teams in basketball. SDSU is will be returning a team that looks very different than what we would have expected at the end of the Summit League tournament last March, just because of the portal, the transfer portal, the way the NIL has emphasized that, or has made that more attractive to players, as some of the schools have made financial opportunities available to some of the college players, and some of us are still trying to get our heads around how that works, and that's actually legal.
So are the commissioners.
Okay, let's say it's legal, but is it good for the fans? Is it good for the institutions? Is it going to be, how are you going to navigate that as a commissioner?
So we could spend 4 hours here talking about the changes of the NCAA landscape. Let me try to succinctly kind of touch on NIL, name, image, and likeness, and kind of also the other changes that are happening across all of college athletics. So essentially where I would start is that our industry overall, I talked about 32 Division I multi-sport conferences, from the Big Ten, the SEC, all the way down to those that are at the lower level. What makes us different? Certainly there are sport offerings. Some have football, some don't have football. But what makes us very different, and what has made us even more different, even in the past probably 15 to 20 years, are the economics that are being driven through really at the top level of intercollegiate athletics. I don't have to tell you, you can certainly read in the newspapers about the media agreements that are being signed, the television agreements. When I refer to media, usually I'm talking about television, that have been signed and will likely continue to be signed, that those that live at the highest levels of intercollegiate athletics. And so the economic ecosphere of college athletics has changed so much. And so when you read about a new media deal from the Big Ten, or you read about a new media deal from the SEC, and you read about millions, and in this case billions of dollars in the recent Big Ten agreement that was put together, what that's then led to is an environment within our industry that has gotten a little bit more litigious. Lawyers have gotten a hold of the rhetoric that's out there and how our industry has changed, and how all these dollars are now flowing through the system, especially at the highest levels. I will tell you, it's not flowing through the system even close at the Summit League level. But, and probably rightfully so, when coaching salaries have escalated to the levels that they have, especially in the sport of football, but even men's basketball, women's basketball, and frankly some of the other Olympic sports, the facilities that have been built at some of the institutions, I think it's caught people's attention and said, wait a minute now, we've got a student athlete that goes to school, let's assume on a full scholarship, not all of them on a full scholarship, but let's assume on a full scholarship, and so I'm providing them tuition, room, board, books, fees, what's called cost of attendance, and now there's other monies, including the Alston case, which the Supreme Court decided last year, monies that they can get for academic purposes. And people have said, is that enough for the student athlete? And so if you think about the football player at Alabama, or the football athlete. And I think a lot of people have questioned that. And I think, like I said, probably rightfully so. And what you've seen is you've seen lawyers, and you've seen people essentially sue the NCAA, the conferences, and institutions for violation of antitrust. And we're not going to get into antitrust law because I'm very far from an attorney. I'm sure we've got some attorneys in attendance here, so I need to be careful. But it's a very gray and a very fine line on whether the NCAA and the business of the NCAA at the highest level is violating antitrust. And so people have taken the NCAA to court, and the Alston case, which is the one that went to the Supreme Court, and the ruling came out last June of 2021, where essentially the NCAA lost the case. Now, it didn't essentially mean free market enterprise, pay players whatever you want to pay players, but it gave some more room in terms of providing benefits that look like financial benefits to student athletes. And so we live in a very tumultuous time, and I get weekly, almost daily updates on what's going on. We've got a committee that's looking at the business of the NCAA and how we need to transform our industry and provide more to student athletes. But we've all kind of stopped short, those of us that work in the industry, of saying that we need to go to pay for play. Because I think when we go to pay for play, then we get into a totally different environment. Is the kid going to go to school, or is he or she just going to be there to play sports? We get into employment law situations. Do players need to unionize? Frankly, there's been efforts already to unionize. And so we've all kind of stopped short, and we've been trying to keep this ship or train, maybe a better analogy, on the track and headed in the right direction while not going to the extent of paying players. So going to Joel's point about name, image, and likeness, and what name, image, and likeness is that I, as let's say a football player at, call it any school, Ohio State, obviously I have value because I'm a football player. Let's say I'm the quarterback of Ohio State. I have value, and in previous world of the NCAA, I couldn't benefit profit off of my name, image, and likeness. I couldn't go down the street and do an endorsement deal with company XYZ. I couldn't host a camp that was under my name and incorporated under my name and take financial benefit from that camp. And so, and this is not recent, we've been living in this now for a year to a couple of years now. The world of name, image, and likeness has become more acceptable from a, I suppose, an ethical standpoint, but also legislatively in the NCAA world, where it's not against the rules for a student athlete to benefit off of his or her name, image, and likeness. The key thing that we've kind of put in there as a caveat is it cannot be an inducement for recruiting purposes, whether that's recruiting pre-collegiate enrollment or inducement while I'm already at one institution and maybe trying to induce me to go to a different institution. And it also cannot be a mask for pay for play. And so that's where the challenges have come, and to Joel's question about how are we managing this, and I would say probably not very well at this point, because I think you could read and see out there that there's a lot of probably NIL activity that's being veiled as recruiting inducements and supposedly pay for play. There's been organizations that have been set up, they're called collectives, where donors of institutions are giving money to the collective, and then the collective houses the money, and then supposedly the collective provides, call it employment opportunities for student athletes, and then they'll pay those student athletes for whatever those employment opportunities are. Whether it's fair market rate and value for what they're being paid or for the job that they're doing based upon the pay that they're receiving, I suppose remains to be seen. But the horses are a little bit out of the barn on this one, and I'm not sure they're going to get put back in, because I'll go back to where I started. We're living in a litigious society in the world of collegiate athletics. And so to think that we're going to be in a world where we're going to restrict in terms of people benefiting from name, image, and likeness, or restricting things like transfers. Transfers has become a big thing in our world. The NCAA and the conferences and the institutions are less likely to fight those battles because we've lost already on some of those battles. And so what do we need to do? We need to try to showcase the value of intercollegiate athletics, try to provide more value and benefit to our student athletes because they deserve more benefit and value, but we need to stop short of pay for play. We need to stop short of recruiting inducements. Whether we can get there or not, a little remains to be seen. I will tell you, at our world, meaning the Summit League world, and our level, and most of the other conferences that are out there in the Division I space, I believe we are what college athletics was for decades in the past and was intended to be, which is an athletic experience on a campus of higher learning. And our job is to provide these athletic experiences for student athletes, yet we need to intertwine an experience that's inherently educational. At the end of the day, you're going to class. At the end of the day, you're a student. And so as we combine student athlete, it has to be an inherently educational experience. And we don't want it to be a transactional business of where all of a sudden we're a league or a conference that's professionalized and now we're dealing with a union. So, Joel, that was a way long answer to your probably, I could have made it a little simpler question, but hopefully that gives the audience a little bit background on kind of what we're dealing with in our industry.
But it wasn't the whole 4 hours. So
It wasn't 4 hours.
that's good. So let's talk about I've heard you talk about some of the things that you want to do and move the league in certain directions, and it kind of involves this media. Obviously, we're not going to have, the Summit League is not going to be operating at the level of the SEC or the Big Ten, and you're not going to have national television contracts or that much money. But you already have you've inherited an existing relationship with Midco Sports. Sure. You've got there's room for improvement. I think there's been some improvement made already in your sort of web presence and apps and other things that are related to the fan experience. So maybe talk a little bit about that, podcast world, and all the other stuff that could be part of the media environment for the Summit League.
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll say to that before I get to the direct question. Number one, we talk about student athlete experience and fan experience a lot in the walls of our office. Our decisions need to be grounded in, is it benefiting the student athlete experience? And then secondarily, is it benefiting the fan experience? The second point to that is I think conferences have become less, I don't know what the word is, maybe mechanical. You think of a conference, you think of a league, what do we do? Mechanical aspect, we're providing schedules, we're providing officiating structures, we're providing student athletes championships, we're helping to interpret NCAA rules, ensuring that schools are within compliance. Those I see as kind of like the mechanical things, the necessary business of a conference office. Where I think conferences have evolved and need to evolve, and we have to do more, do better, is in this world of storytelling. And so how do we tell stories? How do we create content to showcase the successes of student athletes? Because number one, they deserve it. And number two, you all as fans crave wanting to see more, hear more, touch more, so to speak, the experiences that are being had by your favorite program, your institution that you graduated from, or maybe just the Summit League overall because that's who you love to support. And so we need to do more to create content. So that gets to the point of social media. We have to do more to engage fans on social media, create content that they want to consume on social media. We need to establish television relationships, kind of the traditional linear television relationship as we refer to it as in our industry. So you all can consume more games on television. We need to do more on the digital side, whether that's our own digital network, digital platform, or do we have a partner like an ESPN Plus or maybe even a Midco Sports Network Plus. They've launched their recent streaming platform. There's others that are out there. So, Joel, we're actually in the process right now. We hired a consultant, a group called Collegiate Sports Management Group, CSMG for short. And we've just gotten going with them in the past month or so, and they're doing a kind of a market assessment, market analysis of each of our institutions in terms of their production capabilities. Are they capable to produce games at a higher level, whether it be for television or digital? And then they'll also help us assess the opportunities that are out there, whether it be nationally with an ESPN or one of the others, CBS, NBC, et cetera. I do think there's a place for the Summit League that's bigger and better than where we are nationally, and I think that's important from an exposure standpoint for the league overall, but the member institutions' brands. But then also our local and regional relationships, whether it be with Midco or North Dakota State has their relationship with WDAY, and others. Denver has a relationship with Altitude in the city of Denver, and there are others across the conference that we need to do more to cultivate those. And so our consultant group is helping us kind of assess and analyze and really put together what does the media, multimedia landscape look like, TV, digital, really probably starting with the 23-24 academic year. These things take months. And so as we just got going, obviously this past summer, it was a little too much to ask that we were going to be able to put something in place, just given what the networks already have in place for the 22-23 year. But as we come out of this into 23-24, I think you'll see a new look in terms of how we're approaching our television and digital relationships.
So just a few minutes left, and I did see you put your hand up when they asked if there were any Swedes in the room, so we're still on a theme here, I think. Congratulations. But let's talk about basketball. It's 2 months away. You know, the league looks, frankly, I suspect the preseason rankings will look a lot different than if we had had that exercise in March of last year. We've had some very high talent transfers away from. I mean, I think in March we would have seen SDSU looked like it had a dominant position locked up for a few more years, and now they're rebuilding. So, you know, how do you see the league shaping up for men's and women's basketball in the coming season?
Yeah, well, a couple things to that. I would say first, we have 10 children. We love all of our 10 children equally. I know you all may not want to hear that in the room, and so the commissioner in the conference office, when we announce those preseason polls, I can assure you there are no votes being cast inside the conference walls on the preseason polls for any of our sports, including men's and women's basketball. But you know, you reference kind of changes, and I suppose it goes back to the point that I made about just changes overall within our industry. The transfer world has changed intercollegiate athletics, and I think it's harder to predict from year to year when you think about a preseason poll, who's going to be your top and who's going to kind of fall down from there and towards the bottom, because you don't know what the transfer world is going to bring. You may think, Joel, to your point about South Dakota State, that a team may be stronger kind of coming out of one season, heading into the next, but then obviously impacts related to the transfer. So I think, listen, I think we're going to have a really, really competitive, compelling women's and men's basketball season. I think it's going to be excellent. I think your alma mater has a chance to be pretty good. Max Asmus is returning, which was a pleasant surprise for the league overall, because him and Oral Roberts, certainly the run that they went on in 2001 in the NCAA tournament helped just with the overall brand of the league. But I think, you know, on the women's side, South Dakota State coming off of a WNIT championship, they seem poised to continue to be successful there. But again, who knows? Who knows? You know, that's why we're going to lace them up. We're going to run out there in the court, and we're going to play the games. And we'll let the chips fall where they may. What I can guarantee you is that it's going to be exciting. It's going to be can't-miss type of basketball action at our level. And we have to prioritize the sport of basketball. And when I say basketball, I talk about the women's and the men's side just kind of together. I don't really segment them. Because, number one, we don't have football. And so if we're not prioritizing the sport of basketball, you know, we're missing something. And so it's where we're going to hang our hat, because I think the conference brand overall and a trickle-down effect into other sports can lift everybody if we're doing what we need to do in basketball. And there's no doubt competitive success is important. We have to win games. In conference, we're only 500. Somebody wins, somebody loses. But outside of conference, if we can make some noise outside of conference, it really helps with the brand of the league. So we're excited about the basketball season. Obviously, it'll be here before we know it. Yeah, we'll see where the preseason polls have everybody.
So last question. And you mentioned it before, your kind of introduction to the experience was at the basketball tournament. We love the Summit League basketball tournament. in Sioux Falls. We think it's been a huge win for the community and for the league. But some of those other children complain that it's a home game for the Coyotes and the Jackrabbits, and that there's an unfair advantage there. I think we think one of the advantages is the support that's come from the community. I can't see how any of the other cities can duplicate the support that you see coming from Sioux Falls for those schools, but those who complain about that are also not getting their fans on a bus and bringing them up here for the tournament. So how do you see the tournament, the future of that tournament? How long can we count on seeing that tournament here in Sioux Falls?
Well, what I'll say is that the President's Council made a decision last summer, I guess it was, to extend the agreement with the Premier Center. And so we have an agreement with the Premier Center that takes us out for the next 3 championships. There's a 4th-year option that I would assume probably gets picked up. So we're 3 to 4 years out, at least into the foreseeable future here. The end of that will come before we know it. So I will tell you that our membership will start to have some discussions about, okay, what does it look like beyond? Now, having said all that, I was blown away, very surprised by the success of the tournament when I was here in March. And it just goes to show me the support that this community and the surrounding area gives to the championships overall. And I saw it, certainly beyond SDSU and USD in terms of the games that are happening that did not feature one of those programs, because I thought that the community still came out and supported the event. I will tell you this, that when we look at championship experiences, whether it's basketball or other, we look at what's in the best interest for the student-athlete experience, first and foremost. What is the environment that we want to put them in to give them the best experience that they can have? And the energy and the atmosphere within a venue and the energy and atmosphere within a market and a community matters. And so the Sioux Falls community has showed up for many years now, and we appreciate that. We appreciate that so much, and so that matters a lot when we have conversations about the basketball championships, because this is a community that is supporting it. That doesn't mean that we won't obviously discuss, ultimately where is it that we're going. I think any good business would discuss, alternatives or options, I suppose, into the future. But we'll always come back to what can provide the best experience for our student athletes, and then secondarily, what provides the best experiences for us to engage our fans on a kind of a widespread basis. And I know a lot of you are there in March, and I look forward to seeing all of you there next March. We think you have a great experience in the Premier Center in around the Summit League Basketball Championship. We want you to have that experience. And so that's important to us, because that helps build the brand of the Summit League, and the growth of the brand of the Summit League and the success of the basketball championships has a trickle-down effect into other things. Business opportunities for the league to help us generate further resources that we can then distribute back to our institutions so they can support our student athletes at a higher level. Recruiting. If our coaches are not talking about the basketball championships in their recruiting spiel, I think they could be missing something a little bit, because I think that's a selling point for a young female or a young male that's considering a college option. And so the experience, student athletes and fans, has a trickle-down effect, and I like to talk about how it has this vicious cycle. If we have great championships and great experiences, it feeds other things that then feed back into further great experiences, and that's where we have momentum, and that's where we can keep things going. And so I can tell you that Sioux Falls has been an incredible community for the championships. I know we'll continue to be an incredible community for the championships long into the future. We look forward to being there in 23 and beyond. And so, right now it's certainly a great spot for us.
Good. Thank you, Josh, for your time.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it.
Well, Joel, thank you very much for moderating again. And Josh, welcome to the community. On behalf of all Rotarians, we want to extend a warm welcome to you and your family.
Thanks,
Very exciting times, but also very challenging times ahead. So look forward to your leadership in the Summit League.
Yeah, thanks.
Word on the street also, there's another game in Iowa that might happen this weekend that since you're a Cyclone, you might be able to root for possibly another team at that point. All right, just a quick reminder, next week there is no Rotary meeting, and then the following week we will be at the Stanford International. So please join us then. Meeting is adjourned.